Hello, Democrats. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. If you could please find your seats and quiet down so we can go ahead and get this started. We have a very exciting discussion for you this afternoon. And we want to be sure we have plenty of time so you can hear from our amazing members of Congress. So I'm very excited to welcome you all to our congressional lunch. This is one of my absolute favorite things that we do here every time we join at the summit. And it's a really good opportunity for you to hear directly from our congressional delegation who is fighting for us every single day in Washington, D.C. I'd like to start by taking a moment, though, to thank some of the very generous sponsors who have made this event possible. Our premium sponsors, U.S. Senator Ron Wyden and IBEW Local 48. And our platinum sponsors, the Western States Regional Council of Carpenters, NGP Van, OFNHP still on strike, SEIU Local 49, UFCW Local 555, New Sun Energy, our wine sponsor, King Estate Winery, and Morel Inc. Yes, thank you to our premium and platinum sponsors. So just a quick reminder before you begin, you will likely see press here this weekend. You can recognize them by their bright pink name badges. And of course, a very big special thank you to all our DPO staff for ensuring that everything runs smoothly. And you can recognize them by their yellow name badges if you ever need assistance. So now, please join me in welcoming to the stage members of our incredible all-woman delegation to the United States House of Representatives, Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, Congresswoman Val Hoyle, Congresswoman Janelle Bynum, and Congresswoman Andrea Salinas. And our moderator for today's discussion, Alicia Quinto, a student from Madras High School.
Hi guys, so my name's Alicia Quinto. I'm a senior at Madras High School, and this is my second DPO event, and I'm so excited to have you guys here. I'm nervous, but bear with me, okay? And I would just like our Congresswomen to please introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about what you guys are currently working on.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Bonamici, and I'm honored to represent Oregon's 1st Congressional District, which is the Northwest 1/6 of the state, and I'm certainly honored to be here with these amazing women of our Oregon delegation. So, which there were 0 women when I started, now we have 5, count them 5. And you said, and thank you, Alicia, thank you for being here. You said, what are we working on? So 3 things, well, many things, but 3 things I'll focus on. Fighting the Trump administration, and that has started since the first Trump administration and continues to this day. And what I mean by fighting is we're doing things that we have never done as members of Congress before. We are protesting. I've stood outside of the Department of Education where I got locked out. I stood outside of the Department of Labor. I stood outside the Department of Commerce advocating for NOAA. I stood outside of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We're fighting for those agencies, for the policies. We are fighting this administration every step of the way on their inhumane policies on immigration, on their horrific policies on education. And we're having hearings, shadow hearings, or additional hearings without Republicans because they're not showing up to raise awareness about the harm from this administration. And we're fighting them in court. Shout out to our Attorney General Dan Rayfield, who's been a real leader on that fight. But I'm also focused on delivering for the people I represent. And I didn't get elected just to get things done when I'm in the majority, although the majority is much better, and we're going to get back there. I'm still focusing on doing that. And we need to do that because we want our constituents to have faith that government still works, even though it's an incredibly challenging time. And just one really brief example, Beaverton, which is in the district I represent, Andrea has a bit of it, but they had applied for a transit grant for safety improvements at the Beaverton Transit Center. And it was stuck in the system and not showing up because they're, he thinks he's a king and they're trying to just withhold money. Well, we have a former colleague who's now at the Transit Authority, and I was able to get him on the phone, and he released the money, and we got the $5 million for the Beaverton Transit Center. So you take the wins when you can without giving up the fight. And then the third thing that is really critical is that I am doing everything I can to get the Democrats back into the majority in 2026. And we know we can do that. We have the policies, we have the candidates. We're working hard in Oregon and across the country. And I'm really proud that we have these amazing colleagues, including Janelle Bynum, flipped a district, as we know, in the last election. So those are just a few of the things that I'm working on. And thank you, Alicia, for being here.
Of course.
All right, can you hear me? All right. So first of all, it is really, really great to be here. And let me tell you something. I was driving here, and in Oak Ridge, little Oak Ridge, Lane County, small, rural, low income, very conservative, there were over 60 people holding signs at No Kings protest in Oak Ridge. So that gives me hope, and when it feels hopeless, that's what we need to remember. They want us to think that we don't have a voice, but we do have a voice. So what am I working on? Trying to preserve democracy, right? The Trump administration doesn't want us to have elections, right? They are doing everything they can to make sure that people don't have access to the vote, including colluding on the sale of Dominion voting machines to a right-wing billionaire who is an election denier. So they are buying our elections. I mean, I could go back to Citizens United, but so preserving democracy and making sure everyone knows about that. Number two, upholding the Constitution, which is what my Republican colleagues like to talk about, and yet they violate it every single day. So upholding the Constitution, and when we talk about the Constitution, we cannot forget that the Supreme Court is poised to overturn Article 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And that will mean an extra 19 seats that they will gerrymander, taking the voice away from black and brown communities, from Democrats across the country. You know why they need to gerrymander? Because they can't win on their agenda, and that's what we have to remember. Upholding the Constitution, and then being a voice for working people. Democrats have lost the votes of working class people, and we need to make sure that we are speaking to them, and we are fighting for them. And I guess the overarching thing, this isn't really a fourth thing, because I can't do any of this until this thing happens, which is getting my Republican colleagues to do their damn job and show up to work and open up the House and swear in Adelita Grijalva so the American people can see and have transparencies on the Epstein files.
All right, good morning. I think I'm in my district. Is CD5 here? All right, well, I always start everything off with give 'em hell, Deschutes County, and you guys say, come on, give 'em hell, Democrats. All right, let's try it one more time. Give 'em hell, Democrats. Give 'em hell, Democrats. Give 'em hell, Democrats. All right, that's how we started. That's how we've done 20 town halls to date when Lori DeReamer wouldn't show up for any of them for us. We've been holding town halls. We've been making sure that people's voices have been heard. And quite honestly, I've been standing up for our young people. You guys know that I'm a mom of 4. They're not little anymore, but they're always little in our hearts, right? I've got a 23-year-old, 21, 17, and 15. And we all know that their trajectory, their on-ramp to adulthood is looking a little thin these days. And so when I would go door to door and I would talk with people, they said, I'm okay, but I'm concerned about our young people. I'm concerned about their ability to buy a house. I'm concerned about their ability to even move out. The average homeowner now, the first-time home buyer is 38. And that's not good. So we've been working on home buyer protections, making sure young people have a chance to come out of school without a lot of debt. We've been working on special education. Shout out to our educators, Deb Barnes, our leader for Education Caucus. We've been working on cost, jobs, and quality of life. That's purely what we've been focused on. The other things that are really important is making sure that everybody has a voice at the table. You guys know CD5 is a purple seat. It's a purple seat. So it's going to take more than us Democrats to make sure we win this seat back. So we've been working really hard, making sure we're on both sides of the mountain, making sure that everyone has a seat at the table. We've been talking with farmers, we've been talking with business people, we've been talking with Democrats. Republicans are welcome to just talk. And I know yesterday, it was funny, I had a conversation with one of my Republican colleagues, and I said, I was thinking about inviting some of your colleagues that can't quite figure out that Portland isn't a war zone. I was thinking about inviting them down just for a spaghetti dinner. And he was like, oh yeah, I've heard Portland is nice. And I wanted to say so badly, like, you want to say that on TV? You want to say that on TV? So, so really it is about changing the narrative and making sure that the American dream is still accessible to everyone. The final thing I'll say is, while Trump is out here enriching himself and enriching his friends, I've been carrying the mantra of run us our money, which translated is give us the money that you promised us. The money for our roads, the money for schools, the money for housing, the money for our election systems, all of these projects that had federal ties to them in our education system, our research projects, all of these projects, they were promised to us. And they let us down. And they took our money away. And I'm saying, run us our money. Stop stealing our money. Stop taking our funds. Stop enriching your friends. And make sure that you're investing in American people. So that's what we're doing in CD5. I'll close out with saying, give them hell, Democrats. All right.
First off, it feels, so for folks who don't know me, Andrea Salinas from the Willamette Valley, Congressional District 6. I said this last week at the Washington County Newburger dinner. It feels so good to be back here in Oregon because Washington, D.C. is a pretty miserable place right now. Republicans are not showing up for work. They're not showing up for their constituents. They're not showing up for the American people. But Democrats are. And the reason we are showing up, first off, is because it's a big contrast. We're showing up for our folks, and we're showing up to basically say, hey, healthcare is already too expensive, and Republicans want to make it more expensive. We're hearing from our constituents already. I put out a survey as soon as the Republicans passed their big, ugly bill, and I asked my constituents, as soon as you start seeing those notices in the mail, let us know. Let us know how much you think your premiums are going to increase. And I started hearing from folks, especially in Yamhill and Polk County. And I heard from one couple, Steve and his wife. Steve is already on Medicare. He is, I think, 67, but his wife is 63. And her premiums right now, she's on the exchange, she's on the Affordable Care Act, and her premiums right now are about $300. But they're going to increase here pretty soon to about $800, $500 more. They don't think they're going to be able to afford that. She's not on Medicare yet. She's a waitress at a local diner. They can't afford that extra $500. Who could? And then Connie from Dallas, she also is not going to be able to afford. She right now pays about $800 a month. Her premiums, and she's on a bronze plan, which means she only gets necessary care. Her premiums are going to increase to $2,000 a month, $1,200 more. So we've been holding, as Suzanne mentioned, shadow hearings. The Democrats, Republicans, nowhere to be found on Capitol Hill. The press has been covering this. We have been making inroads on this issue, on the affordability of healthcare. Healthcare is already too expensive, and Republicans are hell-bent on making it more expensive for the American people. My constituents, their own constituents, even Marjorie Taylor Greene's own children recognize that either she recognizes that it's going to be more expensive for her own children, or she recognizes that she may not get reelected next year because of how expensive this is going to be. So we are making inroads, and it's really important for us to continue to show up, to repeat the same message, and for the American people to know that we have their backs. That is why it's so important to continue to do this work. It shows the contrast between what we are fighting for and that they aren't fighting for anything. Something else I did last week was the Democratic Women's Caucus. I'm on their leadership steering committee, and we decided to show up for Adelita Grijalva. Not only was she sworn in over 3 weeks ago, not only do we want her as the 8th Latina in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I'm also on leadership. Yes. She has been elected by her constituents. Over 720,000 people in Arizona do not have representation right now, but we also want the 118th person to sign the discharge petition to open up the Epstein files. We marched to Speaker Johnson's office. When we all landed to show up again this past week, he wasn't there. We insisted to swear her in. We need Adelita to be the next member of Congress to open up those Epstein files and to make sure that we move this country forward with affordable health care, to make sure that the American people have what they need. They aren't showing up. They're not showing up for Oregonians. They're not showing up for the American people, but Democrats are. And it is going to take all of us to get there in 2026. That is what we and this panel is doing for the American people and for all of you heading into this next election cycle. So again, it's so good to be here today. Thank you so much for all you are doing.
Well, thank you guys for sharing. So now we're going to move on to our discussion questions, starting off with, when the government shuts down, people feel it fast, from food assistance to housing help and health programs. So how do you fight to protect those critical supports, and is there any real hope of convincing Republicans to not use them as leverage?
Certainly a government shutdown isn't a good thing. We know that. But at the same time, as you heard, we are not going to lock in a budget that causes these ridiculous increases in healthcare for people. So I've been through government shutdowns before, and we are in my office, and I know in my colleagues' offices as well, we're doing everything we can to connect people with services. I'm working with Representative Bobby Scott on the Education Committee to save money for WIC, for the Women, Infant, and Children program. We're doing all we can to keep things going. But I tell you, this administration is trying to take advantage of it. It's pretty outrageous. Russell Vogt, you've heard of him, right? The evil man who's running the Office of Management and Budget, who, by the way, wrote Project 2025, the playbook that they're now implementing, that, if you recall, Donald Trump said he didn't know anything about. They're trying to use this opportunity, now that the government is shut down, to lay off people, to do mass rifts and just lay off people that they don't like or get rid of what they call Democrat programs, although nobody really knows what that means. So fortunately, the courts are intervening here saying you don't have the power to do that. So I hope we get through this soon and get the Republicans back to Congress. We've been there 3 weeks in a row without the Republicans. It's absurd. They are just not showing up. So we need them to come back to the table so we can get the government back open without locking in those ridiculous healthcare increases. But at the same time, we want to make sure, I mean, I have so much respect for federal employees who are out there doing their work without getting paid. It's pretty outrageous. We don't expect people to work without pay. They're supposed to be paid after, although the Trump administration's even trying to get rid of that. So we're working hard to get the government back open, but we need the Republicans to show up to do that. And it's excuse after excuse. I was elected in a special election like Adelita Grijalva. I was sworn in 7 days after my election, and that was considered a long time. She's been waiting more than 3 weeks. So they keep putting this off. They keep putting off even showing up to do their work. So they need to get back there so we can get the government back open, get services out there, and do everything we can in the meantime to meet the needs of our constituents who are really worried that their benefits, whether it be veterans benefits or housing, education dollars, those need to flow, and right now it's really challenging. So we're in the fight, and we're in the fight to get the government back open, but we need the Republicans to show up and do their job.
So I think normally a Republican administration would consider the fact that people are suffering. In the last shutdown, I was talking to Peter DeFazio. I talk to him all the time. I am very lucky that my predecessor is committed to making sure, like, he'll read through things and say, this is what you should read, and he's a valuable resource. But he said in the last shutdown, we had air traffic controllers driving Uber 8 to 10 hours than going to work at the Eugene airport, right? I remember, we're putting together food banks for our TSA agents, right? Our Capitol Police show up and they are not getting paid. I am not accepting a paycheck until federal workers get paid, but and I believe that's what we're doing, but my Republican colleagues aren't showing up to work and they are getting paid. The problem is that this administration revels in the pain of the American people, and they're putting out there that this is the Democrats. This is the Democrats. You know what? It's not working. And this is the first time in 3 years I feel like we have them on their heels. And we are not going to break, which is what Mike Johnson expected. We are not going to stop talking about the Epstein files. He's sworn in Republicans when we weren't in session in a couple of days. So they're trying to distract us while moving forward with their authoritarian and violent takeover of our city. So fundamentally, we have to understand that the people who are working, the federal workforce that aren't getting paid, are in really, really dire conditions. But I can't tell my constituent from Cottage Grove who had an $87 a month copay for her Medicaid. It is now, in January, going up to over $1,000. And if people say, and I've had them say, but I have private insurance, I'm not on the Oregon Health Plan, why should I care? I talked to a private business owner in Eugene. He provides health care for his employees. His insurance premiums just went up 70%. So the fact of the matter is this affects everyone, which is why Marjorie Taylor Greene is talking about it. She understands, I mean, she's a sociopath, but she understands the populist vein and why Republicans should be paying attention. So we're going to hold the line, but we all need to make sure we're checking in on our federal employees, neighbors, and friends.
Okay, so our second question is, right now Democrats don't hold the reins of power in Congress. What do you think the minority party can still get done, and how are you working to make that happen?
We obviously get this question all the time. And I think, Congresswoman Bonamici touched on this a little bit. There are things that we are able to stop from happening, right? So when Trump and Elon Musk decided to come in and just take a chainsaw to the federal government, we started hearing about all kinds of offices all over Oregon that were supposed to be cut. And the Salem Social Security office was one of them. And folks in the Willamette Valley were scared. And so the Salem Social Security office was one of them. Not only, the workforce, but folks who, a lot of older Americans, older Oregonians don't like to go through a phone tree, and they can't navigate a phone tree, so they go to these offices in person. We were able to keep that Social Security office open. There were a lot of BPA employees who were supposed to be cut that we were, I think as a delegation, we were able to keep them there. And we were really, that would have been horrific, actually. I see some people clapping, so you probably either knew people or you were one of them. So it's things like that that we can prevent from happening. And these can be catastrophic to our energy grid, actually, the lights going out here in Oregon. But there are things that we can actually do. Trump threatened the 988 helpline for people who are contemplating harming themselves. Well, he actually did cut out the 988 LGBTQ Press 3 youth hotline. Very ugly. This is targeted. This is him telling a population of people, you don't matter. I was pissed. And I'm a co-chair of the Mental Health Caucus. My daughter is queer. I'm part of the Equality Caucus in Congress. I stand up for everybody. Everybody matters in this country to me. We worked with our advocates. We got a press conference in front of the Capitol and the House Triangle, and we got one Republican, Mike Lawler, who's in a really tough race back in New York, to stand with us. And that felt like something, to say, you know what, our LGBTQ youth, you matter. To say that we need Trump to keep that youth hotline. Were we successful? No, we weren't. But we also were able to tell the community, you still matter, and you can still call 988. Everyone can call, everyone should know this. Anyone can call the 988 line, and anyone can use the volunteers who are there who have lived experiences, and you can still use the line. But it does matter, because we will find people on the other side of the aisle on any given issue, and we will try to work with them. It doesn't always mean it's going to happen, though. But we are trying. We are trying to make headway on some of these issues, because some of these issues mean life or death for people. And this administration and President Trump do not care. And we have to remind people on the other side of the aisle that that's what we have come to. He does not care. And I have reminded folks in rural areas, he does not care about rural. He does not care about the 4 hospitals right now in Oregon in rural areas that are at imminent closure. He does not care that we do not have a farm bill, and we are long overdue for one. He is sending money to Argentina for soybean crops. He is hurting row crops here in America. He is hurting our specialty crops here in the Willamette Valley. He does not care, yet these are the same people who got him elected, yet he does not care. But you know who cares? This delegation. I'll stop there and let somebody else.
I want to talk a minute about political violence. And I don't know, was it a month and a half ago or so that we lost the senators from Minnesota and the speaker? I can remember actually flying home that previous evening and texting the Clackamas County Sheriff Office asking them, can you do some extra patrols past my house? And my gut just told me something wasn't right. And then the next morning, we woke up to those murders. What happened there was I think, a political signal that if you introduce chaos into the system, people will become disillusioned with politics. They will become disillusioned with government, and they won't participate, and then those in power can just do whatever they want to do. It will discourage people from running. It will discourage people from voting. It will discourage people from challenging. And I found that very, very troubling that day. And as we, had subsequent conversations about what our own security looked like, shout out to our security team that's here today, thank you. As we had those discussions, it turns out Republicans had those same concerns. And so as a member of the Bipartisan Women's Caucus, I talked with them and I said, hey, can we ask for a stronger response from leadership about our own security and about security just in general? Because in my opinion, I don't think they were coming to the table with enough. It's just as important for me to be interested in my personal safety as it is for me to be interested in the safety of the people that come behind me, to make sure that these positions are open for anyone to run and for the best people to be interested. So I share that because even though this administration is like trash to me, there are people that have common interests. And you'll always hear me say, sometimes we agree on the what and we disagree on the how. If we can agree on the what and figure out how we can compromise on the how, we can move the ball. And that's what I think is really important, especially in the minority party. So our office has already passed 4 bills out of the House with Republican support straight through, because it's the what that we're agreeing on. And I think in the minority, when you don't have the power, you still have to figure out how you can be powerful. Have you ever met a 2-year-old? Have you ever met a 3-year-old? Have you ever met a 15-year-old boy? Right? They're little, but they're still powerful. They're in the minority position, but they're very powerful. They'll tell you they're not moving. Right? So I want to give you some hope that we still have power even in the minority. We just have to be smart about how we use it, and we have to pick the battles that we think we can win and plant the seeds for when we do win back the power.
And I just want to add, I mentioned briefly the story of getting the $5 million for the Beaverton Transit Center. And the reason that happened is because I had formed a relationship with a moderate, not crazy, not MAGA Republican who lost his seat and then went on to work at the Federal Transit Administration. So you build those relationships and try to get things done that way. I also have bipartisan legislation. I'm very passionate about education, and for several years I've been working on an arts education for all bill because it's so important for students to have access to the arts, for creativity, for engagement, for mental health reasons. Arts are healing. Now I have 2 Republicans on my bipartisan arts education for all bill. That doesn't necessarily mean it will pass, but it means it will at least have a chance because we have to form those relationships. Even though we don't agree on every issue, I found over the years, because I represent not only part of Portlandia, but also I represent 3 rural counties. Anybody here from Clatsop County? Columbia County, Tillamook County, those are all in the district I represent. I found over the years that people want the same things. They want good jobs. They want access to health care. They want clean air and clean water. They want safe communities. They just might have different ideas, as Janelle said, about how we accomplish those things, and really different ideas about the role of government in accomplishing some of those things. But when you start with that premise, you can start to build those bonds. And even though, right now it's an incredibly challenging time, we're not going to get anything done unless we form those relationships and have bipartisan legislation. And then just one more story too about, even though I'm in the minority, something that I was able to work on that I'm pretty proud of. On the Education Committee, I see my responsibility as a policymaker to have a path to success for everyone, and not everyone's on the same path. And there's a great program run through the Department of Labor called Job Corps. And I have 2 Job Corps centers in the district I represent. Tongue Point Job Corps, which is a residential Job Corps program, and Astoria and Pivot, which is a Job Corps program in Portland, non-residential. Well, last year, a member of the Education Committee, who is now the Labor Commissioner, or excuse me, a Labor Secretary, Lori Tevez-DeReamer, who posed for a picture with herself as the defender of Job Corps and a Job Corps champion. Well, she announced she was closing Job Corps and sending all the students back to their homes of record. Now, Job Corps is a program geared towards students who aren't successful in traditional schools, and many of them are coming from homeless shelters or the street or foster homes or dysfunctional homes. You can't send them back to their home of record. You're destroying that opportunity in a lot of jobs. So I went immediately to pivot. I immediately spoke up. She came to the committee and I questioned her about it. She used the excuse that there was litigation pending, so she couldn't answer the questions. And then I went over to meet with the Job Corps staff and director. She did not approve my request to meet on the campus, outrageously. So we met at Clatsop Community College and then took a picture in front of the sign saying that we strongly oppose this. And now they're taking the people back. They know that they can't close Job Corps without an act of Congress. They think they can, but they can't. So with the court action and with the action and advocacy to do actually across the country, because it's a very popular program, the students are going back, the faculty's going back to Job Corps right now anyway.
Thank you, guys. Question 3. Many rural towns are shrinking and getting older. You all represent communities that are trying to keep their schools, clinics, and main streets alive. So my question is, give me a second. What can Congress do to help bring new life and opportunity to rural Oregon and make sure young people see a future in those towns?
So I'm the only Democrat that does not represent part of the Portland metro area. I am completely outside, so the top of Lincoln County down to the bottom of Curry County. A lot of my district is rural. We have, Andrea spoke to rural hospitals that are on the verge of bankruptcy because so many of their patients are on Medicare or Medicaid because we have an aging population. But if we include our frontier areas, there are 11 out of our 33 rural or frontier area hospitals that are on the verge of closure, including 2 in my district, Coos Bay, and another one. But fundamentally, that means people are going to have to drive 4 hours to get to the hospital, right? So one thing is, I sometimes don't think my Democratic colleagues from the East Coast understand the size and scale of the West and how big things are, but also what those problems are. So I explained to a New Jersey colleague, I said, my district is 2.5 times as large as your state. He was complaining that it took him an hour and a half to get somewhere. I'm like, hold my beer. And I have the second largest. Cliff Benson's district is 5 times larger. But let me tell you something. People in Coos Bay, people in Douglas County, people in rural Oregon used to vote for Democrats. They used to vote for Democrats when they had jobs. And yes, they had jobs in the timber industry. They had jobs in the mills. They had jobs where they were represented by unions. And they had pensions. And they had a future. We used to ship, Coos Bay was the third busiest port in the world in the 70s, right? And we shipped lumber. And now we export our children because my kids are up in Portland metro area, because we don't have the jobs for young people to stay. So what can one, we have to recognize that. And what I see, I love my party, but people who can't afford food and rent and childcare and putting gas in their car do not need a 60-page white paper on poverty. Because you know what? You can't eat that. And therein lies my frustration with us as Democrats, is we approach the problem in an academic way when people really want someone that's going to connect with them and connect with the fact the system is not working for them. They don't want people that are protecting a system that is broken. It is why Trump won. because he's like, this system's not working for you, and then pointed to all the people that they should blame, not him, and then has succeeded in breaking things worse. But if we can find jobs with federal investments, for instance, I've talked about the Port of Coos Bay. There is not anyone that's talked to me that hasn't heard about the Port of Coos Bay, and an opportunity to expand that port for 6,000 permanent jobs, to expand rail so that we're taking diesel trucks off the road, so we have a significantly lower carbon footprint, right? So that we can invest in our supply chain infrastructure, and we can build it with union labor because we have project labor agreements for every single job. And all of those union jobs come with an apprenticeship program that the unions and their union contractors pay for. So that's opportunity, but also in rural communities. In my district, nowhere has more than a 0.5% vacancy rate. So we also have to build housing, and that's part of this project. So between that, and by the way, thank you to the legislators here who voted for $100 million in bonding authority to do for dredging and planning. But, so thank you. Congress allocated, actually the president allocated $69 million worth of grants, and we had a press release and we talked about it. The Trump administration got it out the door because they recognized that getting shovels in the ground would mean that these people thought about them and that those jobs came from them, and therein lies a disconnect. So we got that $69 million with no strings attached because they understand the importance of bringing rural jobs. And that is frustrating to me, but you know what? We've got to do it. We've got to get people working again. We've got infrastructure projects that Congress can invest in. We have workforce programs that Congress can invest in. So what can Congress do? We can actually start focusing on the needs of working people. And I'm sorry to go on this rant, but when Biden left office, there were 3,600 grants at the Department of Transportation that had been allocated and the money hadn't gotten out the door. Can you imagine if we'd have gotten that money out the door? People would say, Democrats work for me. So we have to start working for working people if we want to earn their votes, and then we can be in charge again. And if we're not in charge, the people that are going to suffer most are the people that have the least.
Thank you. Just want to add one thing too. Everything Val said, but I also want to mention, as someone who represents rural communities as well, it is oftentimes the school that is the heart of that community. And when I visit schools, whether they be elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, community colleges, that is often the heart of the community. And so I have fought for years and years the privatization of public education, and it has been the rural communities that have helped stop vouchers, because the heart of the community is the public school. You can't give a voucher to somebody in a small, Jewel or a little town over on the coast and say, we're cutting your public education funding, but here's a voucher so you can go to another school. There is no other school. So preserving public schools and also having engaging programs. Like I've seen amazing career and technical education programs in some of these rural areas that are aligned with the economy there in the town. And just one more thing too on the investments. I represent Clatsop County, and we were able to help the Astoria, the hospital there, Columbia Memorial Hospital, get a $20 million grant from FEMA to build a strong hospital with vertical evacuation, because anybody on the coast knows that when there's an earthquake and tsunami, it's going to mean a massive loss of lives. So we were able to get that grant. The $6 million came from the state. Thank you, state legislators. Thank you, state of Oregon. Guess where the $14 million is? FEMA is not sending that $14 million because Kristi Noem, who I was told I could not call anything except FEMA Barbie, Kristi Noem has just made an announcement that the grants under that program were political and a waste of money. So it has taken, I've been ongoing conversations with them trying to explain This is not a political issue. It is about saving lives. That's not political. So investments like that in rural communities are really, really critical. I'm not giving up. We're going to get that money. They're building the hospital, but at the same time, it's frustrating that they tried to stop it as being political. Those investments in rural communities are not just the hospital and access to the hospital and saving lives of the people in the community. It's all the jobs during the building of the hospital. So those things are important. Those investments are really important, especially in including in rural communities.
So I want to issue a challenge to us as Democrats to figure out how to be investment friendly in this state. The only way our kids are going to have jobs is if companies decide to start here or relocate here and stay here. That a job is not like an idea, it's a real thing. And the term I learned yesterday was survival jobs. A lot of our young people and even older people are in survival jobs. They're not in family wage jobs. And we need a whole spectrum of jobs in this state. So my challenge is, especially, to our leadership, and I consider us all leadership, do everything we can to make Oregon the #1 choice to start a business or relocate a business or keep a business here. So that's the first thing. And then second thing is I just want to share that I went to my credit union just the other day, and they had a brochure on the table, and it said, get a loan, get into the space of your dreams. It was an apartment deposit loan. Okay? They are doing, now shout out to the credit union, they're meeting a need, right? They're saying people don't have enough for the deposit. They're offering 6 to 9%, low rate was what they said, 36 months, up to, I think it was like $3,000. You're supposed to ask like your grandpa or your uncle or your dad for your deposit and move out. This is not for you to go in the public space and get a loan so that you can move out. Like that's not okay, and we should not normalize young people having to borrow to move on. I think that's wrong, and so I'm really sensitive to what the 21 to 30-year-old set is experiencing right now. And if the banks know that that is an opportunity, if the financial institutions know that that's an opportunity, they've studied it, they know there's a market, and there's obviously someone taking advantage of that. And I think that it's wrong. So what that means is we absolutely need to build more housing. And the federal nexus to that is we need to make sure you get the money for the infrastructure projects, because we can't build housing without water infrastructure. We just can't. We can't build it without road infrastructure. The houses won't be worth as much if they don't have broadband infrastructure. So that's where we come in. But ultimately, the 2 points I want you to leave with is we have to be more business friendly. We cannot run our businesses out of business or out of town in this state. No more of that. And we have to make sure that our young people have some place to go and it doesn't break the bank.
So my colleagues have touched on one important thing, which is infrastructure. And infrastructure in rural communities is a really tough challenge. And the thing that I hear over and over again is that those local rural communities don't have enough ratepayers to spread across those communities to pay for that infrastructure. It's very different when you are even in a community like Bend or clearly Portland or Eugene than it is if you are in a community somewhere in Yamhill or Polk County or even some of Val's counties and having to bring that infrastructure and spread it across smaller communities. And yet the federal government has been disinvesting in that local infrastructure since President Reagan. And we have to turn that around. And I have a bill, it's called the Rural Partnership and Prosperity Act. And I have a lot of interest from both Republicans and Democrats on both the Senate side and the House side in doing just that. And yet it did not get picked up. It did from Debbie Stabenow when she was chairing the Senate side, when the Democrats had the Senate in the last Congress. It got picked up in her farm bill. It is clearly not going to get picked up in the farm bill placement holder this time around, given Republicans have control of both the House and the Senate. But this would correct for what our rural communities are seeing, and it would lay the foundation for getting that infrastructure in rural communities back on track. They don't have the attorneys or the grant writers to go after those types of grants that would provide the infrastructure the same way some of our larger communities and cities do, and so they get left behind. And this would correct for that. It would essentially give them that leg up that they need so badly, because they are competing with the Portlands and the Chicagos and the Austins of the world. And it's just not fair. And Reagan basically pulled the wool out from under rural. And Trump's not correcting for it. And neither are our Republican colleagues. But our Republican colleagues recognize it. They're just not fighting for it. Well, I am. I am fighting for our rural communities right now. And we have to do something about it, because we're not going to get the type of housing that's needed to save these rural communities. And what I'm hearing from our younger generations is they're not willing to take over the family farm if it's not going to pencil out. And right now, with Trump sending $20 billion to Argentina for soybeans and then letting China buy that soybeans from Argentina, we are being splintered. And we are not going to have an agriculture industry in the United States anymore, when we have always been the breadbasket of the world. This is a sad state of affairs, and it is going to take Democrats to step up and correct it.
I want to add two more quick things that tie this together: the economic development in rural communities. A lot of the economy in rural communities is small businesses. And as the daughter of a small business owner and the mother of a small business owner, I know that we have to support our small businesses, whether it be access to capital, understanding that a lot of businesses are started by immigrants. We absolutely need humane, just, comprehensive immigration reform, but also people who might want to start a small business, they might not be able to do that if they have massive student loan debt. So as a member of the Education Committee and a member of the Higher Education Subcommittee, I know that everybody who wants to go to college should be able to do that without incurring debt. And I say that strongly as someone who worked my way through college and didn't have a lot of debt. That's not what I'm seeing today. The doors of higher education should be open to anyone without incurring debt. And that's going to help, not just in rural areas, but everywhere.
Okay, last but not least, can you name a woman who has opened a door for you in public service?
I'll name a person that knocked a door for me when I first ran. I think this was 2016. It was actually Tina Kotek, and she knocked doors, and I didn't get it then, because people would, like, when you're door knocking, people are like, well, I'm mad about this. And I'm like, well, the speaker's right there. And today I would not do that, because she was completely incognito when she was knocking, and she was, we were just going through the neighborhoods. But I really appreciate that, and I think fondly of those times. So we've come a long way. Okay.
Well, for me, it wasn't somebody who was political. It was my mother. My mother was always way ahead of her times. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and she was a kind of I guess you call a beatnik at the time, but she was an artist and a musician. She played the piano, she painted, and she was a civil rights advocate. And she used to go downtown to Detroit and march for civil rights. And one day she came home and said she was a church organist at a local church. She said, we're moving to a different church because this church will not take a stand against the Vietnam War and for civil rights. She was a member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, so I grew up with the poster on my wall that said, war is not healthy for children and other living things. So the values that she instilled in me really did open the doors of opportunity for me to be who I am. And my values definitely play into the policy I work on.
So growing up, I'm a second-generation American. My, family, grandparents, great-grandparents came from Ireland, and very young, I gotten to hear about Bernadette Devlin McCluskey, and she was an activist for suffrage, because in Northern Ireland you couldn't vote in local elections unless you owned property, and if you were Catholic, it was very unlikely that you owned property. So she did get elected to Parliament, ended up slapping a member of the British Parliament. I was like, it made an impression on me, okay? But she fought even though she didn't have power. And I grew up hearing about her, and I got to hear her speak when I was in college in Boston with a bunch of, and if you know Boston, you know what I'm talking about, bunch of, Irish American, mostly middle-aged to older white guys. And she talked about Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland, and then she called them out and said, it is no different than what is happening here in the United States with Black Americans, and you all aren't paying attention to that. You won't speak up for them. And like half the room left, and I just thought, this woman has such a strong voice. But locally, it was Vicki Walker who pushed me to go to Emerge Oregon, paid the $250 I didn't have, and said, you need to go because I already paid the money. And that's how I got into the legislature.
And I think a lot of folks know the story. I landed here, at the Portland airport, and I had my little 15-month-old baby in my arms, and I got a call from Darlene Hooley's office telling me that she had an opening. Someone was going on maternity leave for 3 months, and that would I come and apply for a little 3-month stint. And I was one of those crazy 30-something-year-olds who had just left Washington, D.C. with no job. And Chris, my husband, who's sitting right here, he didn't have a job, and we had a little baby. And so I said, sure, I'll apply. And what was 3 months turned into 2 years until Darlene retired. And I'll never forget when I first got into Darlene's office, she came over to me and she said, Andrea, we're so happy to have you here. I went over to Pete Stark, and Pete was someone I had worked for about 7 years. And she said, and I went over on the House floor, and he said, absolutely, you have to hire her. She has a great political mind, and she's really tenacious, and she's good with legislation. And the thing about Darlene is that I learned so much from her about how she would disarm people with her big laugh and a warm hug. But my goodness, she was a fighter for the Willamette Valley. And I just learned to love her way about her, but also just her love for the people and the work that she did. So I learned a lot from her.
Well, thank you for sharing your lovely stories. I loved hearing them all. Thank you for your time and being here. And can we get a quick round of applause for these amazing group of women, please? And for me too, I guess.